Be me, Patrick, 28. Working in IT, not exactly thrilling, but stable money, and I know what I'm doing. Sharing a two-bedroom place with my girlfriend, Jennifer. We'd been together around 3 years by then. The beginning phase, honestly great. The kind of easy, low-friction relationship people think only exists in stories. Lots of laughing, weekend trips, overlapping hobbies, everything just clicked without effort. Then she landed a new position in HR at a large, very forward-thinking company. That's when things started to change. Slowly at first, like a leaky faucet you don't notice until the floor is wet. She started using new words. Emotional labor, performative, toxic masculinity. At first, I just nodded along. Seemed like corporate jargon she was bringing home. But it started bleeding into our actual life. She'd come home from work and just unload about all the microaggressions she had to deal with. Some guy named Dave apparently interrupted her in a meeting. Another guy asked her to grab coffee for everyone, and she saw it as a deep-seated patriarchal insult. I'd listen, try to be supportive. That sounds frustrating, I'd say. But my role was changing. I wasn't her boyfriend anymore. I was her emotional support sponge. And sponges only absorb, they don't get anything back. This is where the Not Tonight saga began. It wasn't a sudden thing. It was a gradual erosion. I remember the first time it felt weird. I came home on a Friday, had a good week at work, felt great. Decided to make a nice dinner. I'm a decent cook. I went all out. Got some nice steaks, asparagus, made a red wine reduction sauce. The whole 9 yards. Jennifer came home, seemed pleased. We ate, talked. Well, she talked about her work drama. I listened. Later, we're on the couch watching a movie. I put my arm around her, gave her shoulder a little squeeze. It was like I'd touched an electric fence. She stiffened up completely. Patrick, I'm really not in the mood. Fair enough. Everyone has off nights. I just said, okay, no problem, and moved my arm. The rest of the movie was watched in the total silence. A few days later, I tried again. We were getting ready for bed, just some lighthearted chat. I leaned in to kiss her, a real kiss, not just a peck on the cheek. She turned her head at the last second, so I got her ear. I'm just so tired, she said, letting out a big dramatic sigh. It's been such a long day. And then she rolled over, back to me. Okay, 2 times. Not a pattern yet, just bad timing. But then it happened again, and again. The excuses started getting more creative. I have a headache. I ate too much, I feel bloated. I have an early meeting tomorrow. I need to decompress from all the emotional labor I did today. That last one was new. It felt like she was reading from a script. Each rejection was a little paper cut. Didn't hurt much on its own, but they were starting to add up. I started to feel like a teenager again, awkwardly trying to get to first base and getting shut down. It was humiliating, doing it in my own home with my girlfriend of 3 years. The house started to feel less like a home and more like a shared workspace with a roommate who didn't like me very much. We coexisted. We split bills. We watched TV on the same couch, but with a growing canyon of space between us. I decided I needed to be the good boyfriend, the understanding one. So I backed off on the physical stuff completely. I thought maybe she felt pressured, and if I gave her space, she'd come to me. I focused on other things. I did all the grocery shopping. I made sure the apartment was always clean. I did her laundry along with mine. I was trying to show her I cared in non-physical ways. I was taking on all the household chores, thinking it would lower her stress levels. One evening, I just finished cleaning the entire kitchen, top to bottom. It was sparkling. She came in, grabbed a glass of water, and said, "It's good you're finally stepping up and doing your share of the household labor. Not, thank you. Not, wow, this looks great. Just an assessment, like I was an employee who just met the bare minimum on a performance review. That one stung. A couple of weeks of this passed. Nothing changed. The distance was still there. I finally decided I had to talk to her about it. Communication is key, right? That's what they always say. We were sitting on the couch one evening. I turned off the TV. Hey, can we talk for a minute? She immediately looked wary. About what? I took a breath. About us. I feel like there's a distance between us lately, especially when it comes to intimacy. Her face went cold. It was like a mask dropped. I knew this was coming, she said, crossing her arms. You feel entitled to my body, don't you? I was floored. What? No, that's not it at all. I just miss being close to you. I feel rejected. She actually scoffed. Rejected? Patrick, my no is not a personal attack on you. It's me exercising my autonomy. I don't exist to serve your needs. Forcing myself to be intimate when I don't want to is the definition of patriarchal oppression. I just stared at her. I didn't know the guy I was living with was the physical embodiment of the patriarchy. I'm not asking you to force yourself, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I'm trying to understand what's wrong. Is it me? Is it something I'm doing? It's not about doing anything, she snapped. It's about the expectation, the constant pressure. A woman should be able to say no without having to justify it or have a big emotional debrief about her partner's hurt feelings. The conversation went in circles. Every time I tried to express how I felt, she reframed it as me being demanding, entitled, or not respecting her boundaries. I was the problem. My feelings were the problem. It was a conversation that had a pre-written conclusion, and I wasn't allowed to see the script. I gave up. I just said, "Okay, I hear you." And the Cold War continued. A little while after that, I was talking to my buddy, Sean. We were grabbing a beer after work. He asked how things were going. I'm not the type to air my dirty laundry, but I was at my wit's end. I told him everything. The constant rejections, the buzzwords, the conversation that went nowhere. Sean just listened, nodding slowly while sipping his beer. When I was done, he was quiet for a minute. Then he looked at me and said, "Dude, she's not setting boundaries. She's building a wall, and she's using buzzwords as bricks." He was right. That's exactly what it felt like. He told me a story about his cousin who went through something similar. The girl used intimacy as a tool, a reward for good behavior, and withholding it as a punishment. "It's a power play, man," he said. "She's got you walking on eggshells, trying to earn what should be a normal part of a relationship. You're trying to play a collaborative game, and she's playing a competitive one." I asked him what I should do. "Stop playing," he said. "Just drop the rope. Stop trying to win a game you didn't even agree to play." I didn't fully understand what he meant at the time, but the phrase "drop the rope" stuck in my head. Life went on like this for another month or so. The apartment was quiet. I'd go to work, come home, make my dinner, and then retreat to my computer or the gym. We were living separate lives under the same roof. I was becoming a ghost in my own home. I'd still try, out of habit more than anything. A hand on her back as I walked past, a hopeful glance. Every single time, it was a shutdown, a flinch away from my touch, a cold, "not tonight." I was starting to feel like I was going crazy. Was I this undesirable? Was I a monster? Her social life, however, was thriving. She was always out with her girls. They'd go for brunch, for drinks, for weekend trips. She had endless energy for them. She'd come home at 2 a.m., laughing and energized from a night out. But for me, she was always drained. The double standard was starting to become painfully obvious. Then came the night that changed everything. The straw that didn't just break the camel's back, it nuked it from orbit. It was a Saturday. I'd had a long, crappy week at work. A big project had gone wrong, and I'd been putting in extra hours to fix it. I was stressed and just wanted to connect with my partner, to feel like we were a team. I suggested we order some takeout, watch a movie, and just relax. No pressure, just a chill night in. She agreed, but she seemed distant, constantly on her phone. We're sitting on the couch, the movie is playing. I put my hand on her leg, just a simple, comforting gesture. She looked down at my hand like it was a spider. She physically picked it up and moved it off her leg. "Patrick, for the last time, no, I'm exhausted. I've had a really taxing week and I don't have the capacity for this." I looked at her. She hadn't even had a particularly hard week. She'd told me herself it was slow at her office. My taxing week was real. Hers was an excuse. But I just said, "Okay." What else was there to say? I felt that familiar dull ache of rejection. It was almost comfortable by now. I just stared blankly at the TV screen. About 20 minutes later, her phone buzzes. It's a group chat with her friends. I can see the screen light up from the corner of my eye. Her entire demeanor changed. A huge smile spread across her face. She sat up straight. She started typing furiously, a little laugh escaping her lips. "What is it?" I asked. "Oh, nothing," she said, not looking up from her phone. "The girls want to go out for a few drinks. There's a new cocktail bar that just opened up." I didn't say anything. I just watched. She stood up. I think I'm gonna go. I need a night out. My brain just short-circuited. I thought you were exhausted, I said, my voice flat. That you had a taxing week and didn't have the capacity. She finally looked at me, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. It's different, Patrick. Going out with my friends is restorative. It energizes me. Staying in here with your constant pressure is what's draining. And then she walked into the bedroom. I sat there on the couch, in the dark, just listening. I heard her closet door open, hangers sliding. I heard her humming a little tune to herself. She came out about 30 minutes later. She was a completely different person, full makeup. A dress I hadn't seen before, that was definitely not for a chill night in. Heels. She looked incredible, and she knew it. She'd transformed from a drained, exhausted woman into someone ready for a magazine cover. All that energy, all that effort, none of it was for me. It was for her friends and for the strangers at the bar. She grabbed her purse from the counter. Okay, I'm heading out, she said brightly, like our conversation from half an hour ago never happened. Don't wait up for me. She gave me a little wave and walked out the door. I heard her heels clicking down the hallway, and then silence. I just sat there. I don't know for how long. The movie was still playing on the screen, just background noise. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. It was worse than that. I felt nothing. It was like a switch had been flipped inside my head. A breaker had tripped. All the hope, the frustration, the hurt, the desire to fix things, it all just vanished. It was replaced by a profound, chilling emptiness. A clarity. Sean's words came back to me. Stop playing the game. Drop the rope. And in that moment, sitting alone in the dark, I finally understood. I dropped the rope. I turned off the TV. I went into the kitchen, cleaned up the takeout containers, and washed the dishes. I went into the bathroom, brushed my teeth, and got ready for bed. I got into my side of the bed. It felt huge and cold, and for the first time in months, I fell asleep instantly. I didn't worry about when she'd be home. I didn't care. The game was over. I just didn't know it was me who had to declare it finished. The next morning, I woke up early, around 6 a.m. The sun was just starting to come up. Jennifer was passed out on her side of the bed, smelling faintly of perfume and whatever cocktails she'd had. Normally, my first instinct would be to be quiet, to let her sleep in. Normally, I'd feel a pang of longing, seeing her there. This time, nothing. She was just another person in the room. I got up, making no effort to be quiet. I went to the kitchen and made myself coffee. Then I put on my gym clothes and went for a run. It was the start of a new routine. When I got back from my run, Jennifer was up. She was sitting at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee, looking rough. You were loud this morning, she mumbled, not looking at me. I was getting ready to go to the gym, I said, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. No apology, no explanation. She looked up, a little surprised by my tone. It wasn't angry, just neutral. Factual. I went and took a shower. When I came out, I started making myself breakfast. Eggs, bacon, a proper meal. I made exactly enough for one person. Aren't you making any for me? She asked. I glanced over at her. Didn't know you were hungry. The eggs are in the fridge. I sat down and ate my breakfast while scrolling through my phone. The silence was heavy. She was staring at me. I could feel it. I finished eating, put my plate in the dishwasher, and went into the spare bedroom, which I used as my office. I closed the door. This became the new normal. I stopped initiating any kind of conversation beyond basic logistics. Did the mail come? I paid the rent. We're out of milk. I stopped asking about her day. I stopped listening to her work stories. If she started talking about Dave from accounting or some new HR policy, I'd just give a non-committal and walk out of the room. The household chores I'd been doing, I stopped. I did my own laundry, I cooked my own meals, I cleaned up my own messes. Her side of the sink started piling up with dishes. Her laundry basket overflowed. The dynamic of the entire apartment shifted. I wasn't her partner or her emotional support sponge anymore. I was her roommate, and a pretty distant one at that. At first, she didn't seem to get it. I think she actually enjoyed it for a few days. She probably told her friends, Patrick has finally stopped being so needy. He's giving me the space I've been asking for. She was free from the pressure of my existence. My emotional detachment was, ironically, the solution she thought she wanted. I started reinvesting all the energy I'd been pouring into her, and the relationship back into myself. I got serious about the gym. I started going 5 times a week instead of 2. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected. Sean and I started hanging out more, playing games online like we used to. I picked up an old hobby, woodworking. I started spending my evenings in the garage of our apartment building, working on a small project. My life, which had become so small and centered around her moods, started to expand again. I was actually happy, or at least not miserable. I felt peaceful. The constant anxiety of trying to please her, of navigating the minefield of her feelings, was gone. There was no rope to hold on to anymore. My hands were free. About 2 weeks into this new arrangement, she started to notice that something was fundamentally wrong. It wasn't that I was angry or giving her the silent treatment. That would have been a fight she knew how to win. This was different. This was indifference, and that scared her. She started trying to get a reaction out of me. One evening, she came home with a new haircut, a pretty dramatic change. She walked into the living room, where I was reading a book, and did a little twirl. "So, what do you think?" she asked, waiting for a compliment. I looked up from my book, glanced at her for a second, and said, "It's nice." Then I went right back to reading. The disappointment on her face was visible. She was expecting more. She was expecting me to gush. Another time, she tried to start one of our old discussions. She brought up some articles she'd read about how men need to be more emotionally vulnerable. "It's just so true," she said, looking right at me. "Men are taught to suppress their feelings, and it creates so much toxic masculinity." The old me would have engaged, debated, or at least tried to defend myself. The new me just shrugged. "If you say so." It was like throwing a tennis ball against a curtain. There was no bounce back. Her attempts to get a rise out of me started to get more desperate. She started walking around the apartment in less and less clothing. Lingerie she hadn't worn in years. She'd accidentally drop something in front of me while wearing a short robe. I'd either ignore it or literally walk around her to get what I needed. It was like watching a nature documentary, a creature performing a mating dance for a partner who was now a different species. One night, I was on the couch watching a hockey game. She came and sat right next to me, pressing her leg against mine. I didn't move away, but I didn't react either. I just kept watching the game. She put her head on my shoulder. For a moment, it felt heavy, a weight I didn't want. I sat there for another minute, then stood up. "Gonna go get a drink," I said, and walked to the kitchen. I got a glass of water and stood there, drinking it slowly, until I heard her get up and go to the bedroom. I returned to an empty couch and finished the game in peace. The power dynamic had completely inverted. For years, she held all the cards when it came to affection and intimacy. She was the gatekeeper. Now, I was the one who was unavailable, not as a strategy, but because I genuinely no longer cared. I had accepted her no so completely that it had become my own default state. Her rejection had been a slow-acting poison, and I had finally developed an immunity. The side effect was that I was also immune to her advances. She started complaining to her friends. I overheard a phone call once. "I don't know what's wrong with him," she was saying, her voice high and stressed. "He's like a robot. He's just there. It's like living with a stranger. He doesn't even look at me anymore." There was a pause. I could imagine her friend on the other end, probably feeding her the usual feminist-approved lines. "No, it's not that," Jennifer said, her voice dropping. "It's not that he's angry. It's worse. He's content. He seems fine. He's just fine without me." That was it. That was the core of it. My happiness was independent of her now, and that was the one thing she couldn't stand. Her control was gone. A few more weeks passed. The apartment was a quiet, tense place. We were like 2 planets in a decaying orbit, slowly spiraling away from each other. I was already mentally checked out. I was saving money, passively looking at one-bedroom apartments online. I hadn't made a final decision, but I knew where this was headed. The relationship was already over. We were just living in the wreckage. Then came the evening she decided to force the issue. It was a Friday night. I got home from the gym later than usual. I walked in and something was off. The lights were dim. There were candles lit. Music was playing softly. Jennifer was in the kitchen, and she was wearing a silk robe. There were 2 glasses of wine on the counter. She'd cooked dinner. The whole scene was a throwback to the first year of our relationship. It was a complete performance. a desperate last-ditch effort. "Hey," she said, her voice soft and a little shaky. "I thought we could have a nice night in, just us." She handed me a glass of wine. I took it, but I didn't drink. "I made your favorite," she said, gesturing to the stove. I looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes, the desperation, and I felt a little bit of pity. But that was all. The part of me that loved her was gone. It had starved to death months ago from a lack of affection. "I'm not really hungry," I said. "I ate after the gym." A lie, but a necessary one. Her smile faltered. "Oh, well, we can still have a drink and talk." We stood there in the kitchen for a moment. She started talking about her day, but it was forced. She was trying to fill the silence. I just nodded, giving one-word answers. Finally, she put her glass down. She walked over to me and put her hands on my chest. "I miss you, Patrick," she whispered, looking up at me. It was the first time she'd said anything like that in over a year. She leaned in to kiss me. It was slow, deliberate. She was trying to be seductive. And as her lips got closer, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I made a choice. I gently took her by the shoulders, and I turned my head. Her kiss landed on my cheek. It was wet and awkward. She froze, her hands still on my chest. The silence in the room was deafening. The soft music in the background suddenly sounded mocking. She pulled back slowly, her eyes wide with disbelief. It was the exact same move she had pulled on me countless times. The head turn. The ultimate shutdown. But seeing it from the other side, seeing the shock and hurt on her face, it didn't give me any satisfaction. It just felt sad. Final. What was that?" she stammered. I looked her straight in the eye. My voice was quiet but steady. "Not tonight, Jennifer. I'm just not in the mood." I used her exact words, the ones she'd used as a shield, as a weapon, for so long. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was just being honest. The desire wasn't there. It had been systematically dismantled, rejection by rejection. Her face crumpled. It wasn't the look of a woman who was just turned down. It was the look of a queen who had just realized her castle was made of sand, and the tide was coming in. She stared at me, her mouth slightly open. She was searching for words, for an explanation. I don't understand," she finally whispered. "I think you do," I said. I put my wine glass on the counter, untouched. "I'm going to go read for a bit." I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there alone amongst the candles and the cooling dinner she had made. I went into the office and shut the door. I sat in my chair, but I didn't read. I just listened to the silence from the other room. The game was well and truly over. All that was left was to deal with the fallout. I sat in the office for maybe an hour. I could hear her moving around the apartment, the soft click of a cabinet, water running in the sink, the sounds of someone trying to act normal when their world has just been flipped upside down. Eventually, I heard a knock on the office door. "Patrick, can we please talk?" Her voice was thin, fragile. I opened the door. She was standing there, wrapped in a blanket, the makeup from earlier smudged around her eyes. The seductive act was over. This was raw. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why are you doing this?" I stepped back to let her in, then closed the door. We were going to have this conversation, the real one, the one we should have had a year ago. "I'm not doing anything, Jennifer," I said, keeping my tone even. "I'm just done." She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "Done? Done with what? With us?" "Done with trying," I clarified. "I spent over a year trying to connect with you, trying to be a good partner, trying to understand what you wanted. I tried to be patient, I tried to be supportive, I tried to talk about it. And every single time, I was met with a wall." Her eyes filled with tears. "That's not fair. I was just setting my boundaries. I was protecting my own mental health." "You weren't setting boundaries," I said, Sean's words echoing in my head. "You were building a fortress and leaving me on the outside. You used words like boundaries and emotional labor as weapons to keep me at a distance. A boundary is a line you draw. What you built was a prison, and you were punishing me for wanting to be close to you." She started to cry, real sobs now. "So this is revenge?" she choked out. "You're punishing me for all the times I said no?" I shook my head. This was the part she just couldn't grasp. "No, This isn't punishment. This is the consequence. You taught me that intimacy was off the table. You taught me that wanting you was pressure. You taught me that my desire was a burden to you. I learned my lesson. I stopped wanting. I stopped trying. You got exactly what you seemed to ask for. But I didn't want this, she cried. I never wanted you to stop caring. What did you want then? I asked, genuinely curious. Did you want me to just wait around forever, hoping you might be in the mood once a month? Did you want me to be a monk who pays half the rent? I'm your partner, not a pet. You can just decide to pat on the head when you feel like it. She wiped her eyes, a flash of her old self-righteous anger coming through. This is emotional abuse. You're withdrawing affection to manipulate me. I almost laughed. The audacity was incredible. Withdrawing affection? Jennifer, you withdrew it first. You systematically cut off every form of physical affection for almost a year. A hug, a kiss, a hand on the back, all of it. I'm not withdrawing anything. I'm just living in the reality you created. The only difference is that now you don't like it because you're not the one in control. That hit home. I could see it on her face. She sank down into the chair in the corner of the room, wrapping the blanket tighter around herself. So what now? She whispered. Do you want to break up? I looked around the room, at my books, my computer, the small wooden box I'd been making, my life, a life I had built for myself in the ruins of our relationship. I think we already broke up, I said quietly. We just haven't done the paperwork yet. She didn't have a response to that. There wasn't one. We both knew it was true. The rest of the weekend was a blur of quiet, sad logistics. There was no more yelling, no more crying, just a heavy, resigned silence. We talked about the lease, about who would get what. It was surprisingly civil. It was easier to talk about dividing our possessions than it had been to talk about our feelings for the past year. I found a new apartment on Sunday, a small one-bedroom place across town. I signed the lease online that afternoon. I spent the next week packing. Every night I'd come home from work and put a piece of my life into a cardboard box. Jennifer would watch me, a ghost in her own home. Sometimes she'd try to start a conversation. Do you remember when we bought this? Type of thing. I'd give her a short, polite answer, but I wouldn't engage. There was no point in reminiscing. The past was a foreign country. The day I moved out was a gray, overcast Saturday. Sean came over with his truck to help me. As we were loading the last box, Jennifer came and stood in the doorway. So, this is it then, she said. It wasn't a question. Yeah, this is it. She looked at me, her face a mess of confusion and hurt. I still don't understand, she said. I loved you. I still love you. I stopped what I was doing and looked at her. Maybe you did, I said. But your actions told a different story. You loved the idea of having a supportive partner, but you didn't want to actually be a partner. You wanted a relationship on your terms only, with no compromise. That's not love, Jennifer. That's a dictatorship. Sean honked the horn of the truck outside, a signal that it was time to go. I have to go, I said. I walked past her, out the door of the apartment we had shared for 3 years. I didn't look back. Driving away, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. It was like having a tooth pulled. The process was painful, but once it was out, all you felt was the empty space where the pain used to be. I spent the next few months setting up my new life. I furnished my apartment, I focused on my work and got a promotion. I went on a weekend trip with Sean and some other buddies. I was rediscovering who I was without her. About 3 months after I moved out, I got a text from her. It was a long paragraph. She told me she'd been going to therapy, that she'd realized she had been using her ideology as an excuse to avoid intimacy because she was scared. She said she had been selfish and controlling. She apologized for everything. She asked if I would be willing to meet for coffee, to talk, to maybe see if there was anything left to salvage. I read the text message 3 times. The old me, the Patrick from a year ago, would have jumped at the chance. He would have seen it as a victory, a sign that he could fix things. But I wasn't that person anymore. You can't unring a bell. You can't put the water back in the dam once it's broken. I had mourned the relationship while I was still in it. There was nothing left to feel. I thought about it for a minute. Then I typed out my reply. I'm glad you're getting help, and I wish you the best, but I can't go back. I've moved on. I hit send. I blocked her number, not out of anger, but out of a need for finality. It was a final act of dropping the rope. I put my phone down and looked out the window of my own apartment, my own space. The sun was setting. It was peaceful. I didn't feel happy or sad or angry. I just felt free, and that was more than enough.